Tyrannosaurus rex, the most famous predator that ever lived. 13 meters of muscle and bone, a bite force strong enough to crush a car, teeth like railroad spikes. The king, the animal that every other creature in its world ran from. And yet, even the king was afraid of something. We picture the T-Rex as fearless, unstoppable, the undisputed tyrant at the top of the food chain, with nothing in the world that could make it hesitate. But that picture is wrong, because the fossils tell a different story. A story of healed wounds, shattered bones, and injuries that prove this so-called invincible monster spent its life in real, constant danger. Some of those threats came from its own kind. Some came from the prey it hunted. And one of them was so dangerous that even a fully grown T-Rex would have thought twice before attacking. So, what could possibly frighten the most terrifying animal of all time? Let's find out. Before we get to what scared it, let's be honest about just how terrifying the T-Rex itself really was. Because to understand why its fears matter, you have to grasp how little this animal had to fear in the first place. A fully grown Tyrannosaurus was one of the most powerful land predators in the history of the planet. We're talking about an animal up to 13 meters long and weighing as much as 8 or 9 tons, heavier than the largest elephants alive today. It moved on 2 massive pillar-like legs, and it carried a skull well over a meter long, packed with muscle. And then there was the bite. This is where the T-Rex stands almost alone. Its jaws could clamp down, with a force scientists estimate, at over 50,000 newtons, by far the strongest bite of any land animal ever measured. It didn't slice like other predators, it crushed. Its banana-sized teeth weren't thin blades, they were thick, reinforced spikes built to punch through hide and shatter bone underneath. A T-Rex could bite straight through the body of its prey, bone and all, and swallow chunks whole. Its senses matched its weaponry. Studies of its skull show enormous olfactory bulbs, meaning it could smell prey and carrion from extraordinary distances. Its forward-facing eyes gave it sharp, binocular vision and depth perception, the eyes of a hunter that needed to judge a killing strike. This was not an animal built to be afraid. It was the apex of its world, the final word in an arms race that had been running for millions of years. So when we say that even the T-Rex had something to fear, we're not talking about a bigger, scarier monster waiting in the shadows. The truth is stranger than that, because the dangers that haunted the king came from much closer to home. Let's start with the threat the T-Rex faced every single day, the one hiding in its own dinner. We imagine hunting as a simple thing. The predator chooses, chases, and kills. But for a Tyrannosaurus, the prey was not helpless, far from it. The animals it hunted were some of the most heavily armed herbivores that have ever existed, and they did not go quietly. For a T-Rex, every meal was a gamble, and the stakes were its own life. Consider the Triceratops. We tend to think of it as the gentle plant eater, the victim in the story. But look at it again, honestly. A full-grown Triceratops was a living tank, over 8 meters long, weighing as much as the T-Rex itself, with 3 enormous horns mounted on the front of a massive skull. The 2 brow horns alone could exceed 1 meter in length, sharp and forward-facing. This was not a passive animal waiting to be eaten. This was a creature with the body weight of a truck and a face full of spears. A T-Rex attacking a healthy adult Triceratops was taking an enormous risk. One good thrust from those horns could open a deep, deadly wound in the predator's leg, its belly, its throat. And the fossils back this up. We've found Triceratops skulls with battle damage, and we found T-Rex bones with horn-sized puncture wounds. These two animals fought, and the predator did not always win. So even the most basic act of survival, finding a meal, meant facing an opponent that could kill you. But the Triceratops, for all its weapons, was still something a hungry T-Rex might gamble on. There was another armored dinosaur out there that a smart Tyrannosaurus may have learned to simply leave alone. And it's the one I'd argue the king truly feared. Meet Ankylosaurus. If the Triceratops was a tank, the Ankylosaurus was a fortress on legs, and it carried a weapon that could end a Tyrannosaurus in a single swing. Picture a low, broad animal up to 8 meters long, built close to the ground. Its entire back was covered in thick, interlocking plates of bone, studded with spikes. Natural armor so dense that almost nothing could bite through it. Even those bone-crushing T-Rex jaws would struggle to find purchase on that living shield. Attacking it from above or the side was like trying to bite a boulder, but the armor was only half of it, because at the end of the Ankylosaurus's tail was the real nightmare, a massive club of solid bone swung by a thick, muscular tail. Think about what that means. This was a several-ton animal that could plant its feet, pivot, and swing a sledgehammer of bone with tremendous force. Scientists who have studied these tail clubs believe the impact could have been powerful enough to shatter bone, to break the leg of an attacking predator. And for a T-Rex, a broken leg wasn't just an injury, it was a death sentence. An 8-ton hunter that can't walk, can't hunt, can't drink, can't escape. It simply dies, slowly. So imagine the calculation running through a Tyrannosaurus's mind as it eyes an Ankylosaurus. There's the impenetrable armor it can't bite through. And there's that club, capable of crippling it with one well-aimed blow. The potential meal simply wasn't worth the risk of a shattered leg and a lingering death. This is the dinosaur I'd argue a smart, experienced T-Rex genuinely feared and learned to walk away from. But the prey it hunted wasn't the only danger in its world, because some of the worst threats to a T-Rex came from something that looked exactly like itself. The most dangerous thing in a Tyrannosaurus's world may have been another Tyrannosaurus. We have the evidence written directly into their bones. When scientists examine T-Rex skulls, they keep finding the same thing: bite marks. And not from some other species. The spacing and shape of the punctures match the teeth of other tyrannosaurs. These animals bit each other in the face, hard enough to leave deep wounds in solid bone. Why? For all the reasons big predators fight today: territory, food, mates, dominance. A prime hunting ground or a fresh carcass was worth fighting over. And when two multi-ton predators with the strongest bite force on Earth clashed, the results were brutal. Some of these face-biting wounds show signs of healing, which tells us the victim survived. But others don't, meaning that fight was the last thing that animal ever did. There's even evidence, debated but real, that Tyrannosaurus may at times have eaten its own kind. Whether through outright killing or scavenging the dead, T-Rex bones have been found bearing the tooth marks of other T-Rex. In the king's world, even your own species might see you as a rival, an obstacle, or in the worst times, a meal. So picture the life of a Tyrannosaurus from its own point of view. The prey can gore you or club you to death. Rival kings patrol the territory, ready to tear into your face over a carcass. Every day is a negotiation with violence. The crown was heavy, and it was never safe. But here is the part most people never consider. Everything we've talked about so far is the life of a fully grown adult, the peak of its power. The truly terrifying chapter of a T-Rex's life came long before that. Because a young T-Rex lived in a completely different and far more dangerous world. A baby Tyrannosaurus was not a king, it was prey. When a T-Rex hatched, it was tiny, about the size of a turkey, covered most likely in a coat of downy feathers, utterly helpless. And the world it hatched into was the same brutal landscape we've been describing, except now it was the small one. Everything we just listed as the king's problems? To a hatchling, almost every animal in that world was a potential killer. Think about the dangers. Crocodile relatives lurked in the rivers and swamps, perfectly happy to snatch a young dinosaur at the water's edge. Smaller predators, the dromaeosaurs, the raptors, and other agile hunters, would have hunted juveniles eagerly. Even larger adults of other species, and quite possibly adult T-Rex themselves, posed a lethal threat to a youngster. A baby tyrant king had almost no defense except hiding, running, and not being seen. And the numbers tell the grim story. Studies of tyrannosaur populations suggest that a huge proportion of them died young, that most hatchlings never reached adulthood at all. The journey from turkey-sized hatchling to 13-meter apex predator was a gauntlet, and the vast majority didn't survive it. But here's the extraordinary thing. The young T-Rex wasn't just a smaller version of the adult. It was almost a different animal. Juveniles were lean, long-legged, and built for speed, fast, agile runners with narrower jaws full of sharper, more blade-like teeth. They likely chased down small, quick prey, occupying a completely different role in the ecosystem than their parents. So, a Tyrannosaurus had to survive two entirely different lives of fear. First, as the hunted, a fast, frightened juvenile dodging a world full of threats. And only if it survived all of that did it finally become the thing we know, the king. So if you've been with me this whole time, you can already feel how completely this rewrites the story we were told as kids. The one where the T-Rex is the fearless, invincible monster that nothing could touch. That story sells toys, but it isn't true. And if you're the kind of person who wants the real version, the one written in the actual bones with all its danger and nuance and surprise, then subscribe and come deeper with us. Because the true story of these animals is always stranger and richer than the cartoon. Now let's pull all of this together, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The Tyrannosaurus rex was not an animal that lived without fear. It was an animal that survived a lifetime of it. It hatched into a world that wanted to eat it and spent its youth running for its life. If it beat those odds, it grew into a giant. But even then, every meal was a fight against horns and clubs that could kill it. And every territory was contested by rivals of its own kind, who would bite it in the face or worse. Its bones, when we dig them up, are not the bones of an untouchable god. They are scarred, broken, healed, and rebroken. They are the bones of a survivor, and that's the answer to our question. What was the T-Rex afraid of? Not one single monster. It was afraid of the Ankylosaurus's bone-shattering club. It was afraid of the Triceratops's horns. It was afraid of other T-Rex. And as a youngster, it was afraid of nearly everything. The king lived its entire life on a knife's edge, which makes what it became all the more impressive. So the next time you see a Tyrannosaurus rex roaring across a screen, fearless, unstoppable, the monster that nothing could challenge, remember the truth hidden in its bones. Remember that this animal clawed its way up from a feathered hatchling the size of a turkey, through a childhood where almost everything was trying to kill it. Remember that even at its full, terrifying size, It walked carefully around the armored club of an Ankylosaurus, weighed the risk of a Triceratops's horns before every attack, and carried the scars of battles with its own kind on its face. The T-Rex wasn't fearless. And that's exactly what makes it magnificent. Fearlessness is for cartoons. What the real Tyrannosaurus had was something better. It survived a world saturated with danger, from the moment it hatched to the moment it became the most powerful predator the land had ever seen. Every scar on its bones is proof that it faced something that could hurt it and lived. The king wasn't the animal that had nothing to fear. The king was the animal that faced all of it. The horns, the clubs, the rivals, the long, deadly odds of simply growing up. And made it to the top anyway. That's not a story about an invincible monster. That's a story about a survivor. And somehow, that's far more impressive than the myth. If this changed how you see the most famous dinosaur of all, follow the channel so you can keep uncovering the real stories behind these creatures with me. And share it with 5 people who still think the T-Rex feared nothing. Then tell me in the comments, which prehistoric legend should we dig into next? I read every single one. I'll see you in the next Lost World.